council chambers. The first exit is to the rear of the room through either of the two doors located on each side, proceeding down the stairs and out to the main entrance to the parking lot. The second exit is through the corridor to the caucus room in the front right of the room, proceeding through the door immediately on your left, down the exit stairs and out to the South Main Street, proceeding to the parking lot. Once in the parking lot, stay clear of the building and wait the arrival of the fire department. Okay, could I get a roll, please?
Mr. Kurtz? Mr. Charlo?
Here.
Sorry, Marilyn. Mr. Natale, I'm here. Mr. Mercado?
Here.
Mr. Bowman?
Here.
Mr. Dawson? Mr. Carderas?
Here.
Mr. Linder?
Here.
Mr. Tedisco?
Here.
Mr. Anderson?
Here.
Ms. Downs?
Here.
Mr. Selmont?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. We all join in German for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, you're
Chair, I'll be recusing myself for the public hearing.
okay. Mrs. Downs, do you want to sit in for him? Thank you. Okay, can I get the call, please?
The zone text change petition of R.W. Hine Hardware, care of Anthony J. Fazone Esquire, Fazone Ryan and Merchuti, LLC, 2 Town Center, Cheshire, Connecticut, 06410, to amend sections 45.2, location 45.4, C, H, and I, prohibited uses to allow coordinated development of strategically located commercial and residential properties adjacent to existing special development district. Existing and proposed text available for review in Planning Office, 84 South Main Street, Cheshire, Connecticut, 06410, and at www.cheshire.org under virtual documents.
Thank you. Name and address for the record, please.
For the record, I'm Anthony Fazone, an attorney here in Cheshire, representing the applicant. As the call of the meeting indicates, this is an application for a zone text change having to do with Section 45 of the regulations, which is the Special Development District. We are proposing to add 6 properties owned by related entities to the SDD overlay zone. In front of you, there's a map. It shows in blue the existing SDD overlay zone. And then in yellow, the portion that we are proposing to have the overlay zone apply to. It's important to bear in mind that for this evening's purposes, the underlying zones, which in this case for the proposed property, the underlying zones are both C3, commercial, R20A, basically office professional buildings, and some R20 residential half-acre lots. And that's very similar to the major portion of the existing SDD overlay zone. They also, all of those zones are found within that area. I wanted to point out that this application follows the same procedure that was followed by the town when Section 45 was adopted. It's not treated as a zone map because it's an overlay zone. It's not treated as a zone map change. And if you looked at Section 45, you'll see there's an overall description of the 2 parcels that are in the existing SDD. And that's one of the changes to the regulation that we've proposed. And it's a description, an overall perimeter description of the properties that we're proposing to have placed in the overlay zone special development district. Again, the existing SDD is in blue, the proposed is in yellow. What prompted this is that the applicant, which as you can see from the name R.W. Hine Hardware, has found over the last 18 months or so, due to the COVID restrictions, that there have been significant changes in their business. And that primarily has to do with call-in orders and pickup. And despite the fact that the restrictions have been lessened from the virus, the Pat Bowman, who's the manager of Hines Hardware, who's here this evening, has found that the trend is continuing, and based on his knowledge and information of the industry, they expect that it will continue. So in conjunction with that, you know, the R.W. Hine building has been there for a long time. And what the SDD would do is give them flexibility to coordinate a development with the properties that are included. They're on the corner of West Main. There's a commercial property where the car rental, and there's a gift shop there. Then there's some office space and some residential. And all of those, the SDD regulation, and if you were to go back to the Plan of Conservation and Development for the original SDD overlay zone, one of the intentions and plans for the overlay zone was to coordinate residential with the commercial and to attract business into the center of town. And these properties, being commercial and residential, appear to be an ideal situation to have a coordinated development within the SDD regulations. I think many of you were on the commission that did the 2016 revision to the Plan of Conservation and Development, and there's some significant comments in that Plan of Conservation and Development dealing with the SDD. Mr. Volker did a staff report going back and with the history of the SDD, but one of his comments in the report I'd like to quote, and that is the commercial chapter 2016 Plan of Conservation and Development includes discussion of the SDD and recommends that the Cheshire zoning regulations provide sufficient flexibility to maintain the economic health of private properties within the center, and for the consideration of amendments to the SDD regulations as necessary to achieve this flexibility. Those parts that he quotes from the Plan of Conservation Development, and I'm putting into the record here directly would indicate that if you were to grant this zone change, it would certainly not be in conflict with the the existing plan of conservation and development. It's important to remember that the that an application that would come before you in any SDD property is subject to a zone change and special permit application, and gives you the discretion that you currently have with respect to these zones. There are a couple of specific changes that we would be asking for in this application, in addition to the reference to the map and the real property description of the land that would be included if this application is approved. We've looked at the prohibited uses within a special development district, and one of those existing prohibitions is gas stations, and we would like the commission to approve a provision that says unless a gas station exists or previously existed on the site. And I'm sure that you remember that there was a gas station and had been there for quite some time on the Hine property. Because there are other commercial uses that might be proposed in this area, the proposed area, should a plan come before you, there's potential there to have some form of a food service business, a restaurant, a sandwich shop, something of that nature. And if you notice there under section H in the prohibited uses, it doesn't allow consumption of food or beverages off the premises where served. Basically, that's takeout, and for all practical purposes, even in the existing SDDs, that's not practical to be followed. And then the use of shopping carts is prohibited. While Hines doesn't use the specific type of groceries carts, there are things that they use for customers to take to their cars. And we just thought that was, I didn't know, couldn't figure out the purpose for that. And then finally, the Hines store is a little bit over 20,000 square feet now. Certainly they would like some discretion and flexibility to increase the size, and are proposing a 30,000 square foot maximum. But again, I guess my concluding marks are that the commission does retain its discretion in approving any application under the SDD.
Okay, Mr. Ricardo.
Two questions. One, on the gas station, if there was a gas station there or previously, would those pumps and those tanks be in the same area? Would this allow it to move to a different area or the same area that, I wouldn't say contaminated, but you know what I mean?
I think the potential would be that it could move, depending on, there's still the devising or thinking of what the traffic pattern would be, with respect to the whole property. As you know, there's one pretty big curb cut there.
Yeah.
And so whether they'd be in the exact same spot, and that's just kind of remote, but didn't want to give that up if it is approved.
And then second, I think it's Mueller Ave that goes up almost at the top of the north side there. Are there some businesses in there, or we maybe look at extending that all the way up and taking that whole
No,
block instead of?
the extension is proposed only to George Avenue.
No, I understand that, but I'm wondering if it's advantageous to bring it up even farther and carve out that whole block so it's more unified.
That's R20A. We tried to pretty much, stay away from George Avenue, even though the properties go to George Avenue. I think the businesses that are there are all R20A businesses, so there wasn't any thought to go to Mueller Avenue.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Mr. Tally.
Another question on the gas station. So I do remember the pumps, small pumps out in front, but under this proposed change, and I'm not sure if this is a question for Bill or for Attorney Fazone, but would this open the door if somebody wanted to put a big gas station there?
Okay, first of all, the property zone C3.
Okay.
So they could come in right now and ask you to put a convenience store gasoline. Somebody could do that. Somebody could acquire the property. They could come in and ask you to do that. The reason he needs to have it in there is because the SDD doesn't allow
Right,
fuel
understand.
stations. You want to preserve his right. So that really putting the SDD on here doesn't change anything because they don't lose the C3 designation. Okay, so that's there. And even if you were to rezone it to R80, you'd still have the right, then it would become a non-conforming use. They would still have the right to put it back in there. Remember, everything they do on the site is subject to your discretion as well. No one can come in and just put a big box down there and put fuel pumps in front unless you approve it. You have 100% discretion there.
So this is not changing anything. It's not
No.
opening up the door to a big
No.
gas station.
No. Well, again, no, it doesn't open the door to a big gas station, but someone can come in. First of all, remember, for a convenience store, they can only have a 1,500 square foot floor area. So you're right now under your existing regulations, you can't put the convenience store size now typically is 6,500 square feet. So your regulation as it stands right now would only allow somebody to put a 1,500 square footer there. Somebody could come in tomorrow for an application to put a gasoline convenience store there as long as the square footage of the floor area of the retail portion of that didn't exceed 1,500 square feet.
So
So
again,
this doesn't open up
again, it's not
any new
changing
doors.
anything. So right
No,
now,
right.
1,500, if we approve it this way, it's still 1,500.
Correct.
So it's not,
This doesn't give them any rights beyond what they already have. Okay, the C3 zone stays there. This is an overlay over the top of it. They're here because they want to make some changes, and we hope in the near future that they come in response to some of the things that they hope to be able to do. But long-term, they may never come in with a project and may decide to do other things with the property, who knows? But the C3 district is there for as long as you keep it there. But even the fact that they had a gas station there, even if you were to make that a non-conforming use, they could still put a gas station back there once it's been established.
gotcha.
So
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure it was apples for apples.
100%, yeah. This does not empower anybody to bring anything other than what they're already allowed to bring there, and what they're only allowed to bring there from a gas station convenience store is a 1,500 square foot retail portion of it. So,
I guess another example is, let's say at the northernmost point of the SDD, down here. I guess it doesn't go. I thought it went all the way down to the intersection of Maple Avenue and Highland. It doesn't go that far. But if it did go that far and someone wanted to coordinate the properties there, with the gas station, the way it is now, they couldn't do an SDD. But then, you have to look and see whether you feel that the ability to coordinate a development is worth having the property in the SDD.
Mr. Selma.
So originally, looking at all the paperwork, it looked like they were basically wanting to combine all the properties to make it into a bigger project or have some grand plans. What's the intent of putting this SDD overlay on it if they could pretty much do everything they want to do now in that property? Is it because of the,
Well, they can't do everything they might want to do. You might have, probably would have sideline issues between the commercial and the residential properties, and most specifically on West Main Street. And it would really give you an opportunity, and I keep using the word coordinate, but to have a coordinated development there. And you've got residential, the regulation, the Plan of Conservation Development talks about promoting residential use in the town center. So I think the basic difference is the flexibility with respect to sidelines and setbacks.
In addition to that, I mean, he talked briefly about a pickup area, right? Curbside. Well, the curbside is not likely to be in the front. The curbside would be somewhere around the back, but this gives them flexibility to use like a portion of the residential for that, where they can't do that now. You can't put a driveway from a commercial use through a residential property. But if you do this, they have to remember, they got to bring in a special set of regulations for a project. They got to show you a site plan that hopefully you'll like, that will preserve some of the characteristics of there, including these are well-established, well-maintained residential uses. But what the SDD gives them the ability to do is to coordinate a more flexible, even a driveway around it, and use some of the residential property with that. So especially since, it appears, and the 30,000 square feet is there because that gives, from a design professional, if you look at this property from the air, you notice like an assembly of pieces built over time. Well, design professionals don't necessarily like that. It's easier for them, if you give them enough square footage, they can do a reasonable and rational expansion out there, maybe even incorporate a couple of the uses, but you give them enough square footage so they can design a good-looking building that hopefully you will like. And so what the SDD does, it provides a lot of flexibility in incorporating these properties to do a really good layout and not to push up against things, and as he said, get stuck against setback requirements. It's like, for instance, parking, you have to be 20 feet off of a residential boundary line now. Well, this will give greater flexibility for that. Go ahead.
so simply put, they have common ownership of most of the properties within that district anyways.
All that are proposed to you tonight, there's different corporate entities, but it's the same people.
It allows them to merge the commercial use with the R20, with the R20A, so on and so forth. It eliminates hurdles.
Simplest terms, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Tedesco.
Mr. Fazone, you mentioned, it was just discussed now that the property is under common ownership.
I said there are common owners throughout the properties, but it's not a single entity of the same ownership, but there is a vein of common ownership throughout.
Thank you. That was really just to get to my next question. So this special design district, it really only works then, I guess, if all the properties are under some kind of common ownership, correct?
You wouldn't have to do the whole thing. Someone could come in, I think there's a minimum, you could take the Heinz piece and just the other commercial pieces and come in with an application for that.
I mean, the reason I said it is we're talking about differences in setbacks and where parking areas can be in relationship to a residential piece of property. I mean, if it was owned by somebody completely independent, they might say, hey, no, I don't agree with that. And that would kind of
Yeah. No,
mess it up, correct?
There's definitely a common goal that at this point in time, to develop them as a whole.
And so the special design district then allows development of a property where everybody in that area, within the property is going in the same direction without having to deal with things such as setbacks that nobody really cares about in light of their overall purpose. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
SDD is your town center areas, you know, and it's older, smaller lots, weird geometry, cut up over time with no necessarily rational plan for it. It's not a conventional subdivision kind of thing where you have 4 lots of the same type. So you know, and so it was a great concept from that standpoint because it gives owners and you the ability to kind of look at things in a more flexible way and get a better design outcome.
Mr. Talley.
Just for clarification too, Attorney Fazone said he couldn't find anything on the shopping carts. So we're sitting in a special development district right now in this building, correct? As part of this. What was the rationale for having a shopping cart
Okay.
not allowed?
That's easy. There's you look at the period when these things were written. So what's one way to force away large format retailers? Aha, nobody can use the shopping cart. Oh, okay. You know, I mean, think about how the world's changed, right? Think about my needs, right? Okay, 1975, it made a lot of sense to them then, but nobody was going, wait a minute, you know, what about like a CVS where you've got package store, you know, the shopping carts are pretty common now, but it would, that's one way of trying to force away large format retailers, frankly.
Gotcha. I
So-
just think, you know, in the future, maybe that's something we can look at because somebody coming into the watch factory, you have a little store, do you want a little cart?
What do we care? Let them use it. You're 100% right,
It's
right.
something to look at down the road.
Yeah, yep.
Anyone else? Questions? Anyone from the public wish to ask any questions right now? No? Okay. Just go right up to the podium and just give your name and address for the record.
Hi, Mary Cabrera, 35 George Ave. Sure, Cabrera. So I just wanted to confirm a couple of things that Mr. Volker said. This doesn't grant any additional powers that they didn't, or rights that they didn't already have. So anything that in the future, they'd be coming to you with an application
100%.
and giving all the notifications and neighbors being
Right.
involved.
There's no project plan under review here that would, and so, right.
So, right, so it's just granting this
Right.
overlay to
Right.
allow for potential
Right, they
flexibility.
could, and
Yes.
what they would do, what the STD requires them to do, enables but requires, is to have them submit a project plan where you can actually see what they
Yep.
want to do on each one and group them together, and also regulations that apply to that, all subject to public review. So,
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, Heinz has been a great neighbor to us for all these years. We certainly appreciate Pat's involvement in our neighborhood. Our concern is just once there's changes, it's forever, even if Pat and Heinz go away. So we do just want to be involved in the process here.
Okay,
Thank
thank you
you.
very much. Anyone else? No? Okay, Mr. Fazone, am I going? Sorry about that.
I would just point out that any application, all abutting owners would have to get written notice of the hearing, including those across any street. So people on George Avenue would get direct written notice. And I don't have anything further.
I just want to add, in the gasoline stations, I don't know if we should include charging stations on that also.
I would say that it's not proposed right now.
Yeah.
They've not had one out there now. Maybe they'll propose one someday under a set of special regulations that they might submit. If I were you, I wouldn't
Okay,
insert anything in here right now.
okay.
they're not prohibited.
Right.
The difference is they're not prohibited under the regulation, but gas is
Yeah, I'm just saying
prohibited.
with gas should be charging stations
Right.
should be.
But
hand
if
in
that
hand.
was something that they might want to consider later, but he's right. The only thing that's specifically prohibited is gasoline.
Okay.
So.
Anyone else? No. I guess we're gonna leave this open.
The only reason I said, because I know EJ Kurtz said he would like to participate.
Yeah, so
and
just
so,
wait,
yeah.
is that fine?
If you have any other questions, we can bring them up in 2 weeks and we'd have a
Okay.
motion for you at that time either way. So
Sounds good to me.
3 weeks.
Any other
October
questions?
13th.
Anyone else from the public wish to ask any more questions? For this meeting? No? Yes.
Yeah, because
Yes,
of the
it'll be a Wednesday,
holiday, I think
13th.
we're October 13th.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, October 13th.
Okay, so we're leaving this public hearing open until the next meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Who's motioning? Mr. Brucato motion. Second by Mr. Natale. All the favor, say aye. Okay, thank you. Okay, I'd like to call to order the regular meeting for Public Planning and Zoning Commission. I know we're going, Mr. Bowman's up, and we're keeping Mr. Selma as a alternate. Acceptance of the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve both of the minutes. I'm sorry. Like to make a motion to approve both sets of minutes from the last meetings.
Mr. Natale, and second by Mr. Mercado. Any discussion on the minutes? Go ahead, Mr. Bowman. I said, you have discussion on the minutes or no?
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
I
didn't realize you had a second.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
all right.
I'm sorry,
Uh,
Mr. Chairman.
yes.
I didn't understand the motion. I didn't hear the motion.
Oh, we're
Sorry,
voting
Mr.
on the minutes.
Yeah, I made a motion to approve the minutes from the last
Oh,
meeting,
I'm sorry.
from the
Okay.
last public hearing and the last special meeting.
Okay, sorry.
I feel the same way.
I'm sorry if I mumbled. Okay, accepting the minutes. All those in favor, accept the minutes as they are. Say by aye.
Aye.
That's all. All right, communications. Nothing? Okay. All right, so unfinished business, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we're clear here, and 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. This would be a majority vote on this application would be, have to be 6 votes. To be clear on the votes, I'm going to ask each individual commission member, yay or nay, once we do a motion. So we'll go individually. I'll go one side, one side, one side. So I'm going to do it. Clarify, and please, anyone in the public, please respect us and let us finish our job. Okay, going forward, please read the motion.
First item, Mr. Chairman, zone map change petition, Lovely Development Incorporated, to change the zone at 648 Wallingford Road from residential 40 to an age-restricted overlay zone as enabled under section 43.4 of the Cheshire zoning regulations. The Cheshire Planning and Zoning Commission find that this application satisfies the requirements set forth within section 43.4.4 findings of the Cheshire zoning regulations, and that it is not in conflict with 2016 Cheshire Plan of Conservation Development, and hereby approve this application.
Okay.
Move staff wording.
Second by Mr. Kaderis, moved by Mr. Bowman. Any discussion? Bowman, William. Make sure 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, the tally. Just give me 1 sec. Okay. On the motion, Mr. Linder, your vote, yay or nay?
I'm sorry,
What is your
Pertaining to-
vote, yay
pertaining-
or nay? On
pertaining
the,
to what?
the, f-
Pertaining to
the
number
first
one?
motion? Is yes
Well,
or
I'd
no?
like-
You want to, or do you want to
do
have a
we- do we
discussion?
have a- do we
Yes,
have
you
time
can speak.
to,
Yes,
discuss?
yes, you do.
Okay, so, let me just say, I have a few words to say, okay?
Okay, that's fine, Mr. Lynch. You
Let me
have the
just
floor.
say that it's been a long time since we talked about this. People probably have forgotten what we're voting on. I think it's been a month ago. But at any rate, let me just begin by saying that I am not against age 55 and over developments. Whispering Oaks, however, is just not the right type of development. And I'll be voting against the development and I imagine against all the points here. Point one, I'm not sure. Point one, I might vote in favor of if it doesn't jeopardize point two, which I'm voting against. So therefore, I'm going to vote against all the motions. Secondly, I believe that the public and the applicant are due an explanation for all of our votes.
Mhm.
So let me begin by saying, while each house is pleasing by itself, the applicant is proposing 34 of these houses with no variation in design or architecture. We received a letter from a Mr. Matt Wage, who described the proposed development as a wall of vinyl. And again, I'm going over all these points, not just relating to number one, but to all of them. So let me just get this all out of the way. So I visited two of the applicants' developments in Southington. One is called Muirfield and the other is called Kingswood Estates. And they give you a very good idea as to what is going to occur in Cheshire. And they're identical in characteristics to what is being proposed for Cheshire. And it leads me to believe that the proposed development is not harmonious with the nearby neighborhoods, specifically Copper Beach Drive and Tamarack. In referring to the findings section of our regulations, which is 43.4.4, paragraph G, and I'll just read that briefly, and it pertains to what I'm going to say. The development and design of the APRD, which is the 55 and over community, will not have an adverse effect on surrounding properties and will be in harmony with the neighborhood and will not have an adverse effect on property values in the area. So my vote against this development is, first of all, well, primarily because of that one particular paragraph. I want to make another point. When I asked the applicant had a market research firm, and I forget the person I was referring to. It may have been Mr. Kane, but I asked Mr. Kane, why not build less homes, but at a higher price, less but larger homes at a higher price? And he replied that, well, there's a good market for smaller homes, and I pressed him, and he said, well, there is a good market for larger homes. So I said, well, why not build these larger, more expensive homes? And he said, well, it would take longer to sell the houses. So it didn't seem to be a very strong argument to cut the number of homes down and build fewer but larger, more expensive homes. And I just want to, and lastly, I just want to lay out for you, and I think I may have discussed this at that meeting, but the applicant is proposing a price range between $400,000 and $420,000 for each home. If you multiply the average times 34 homes, you arrive at roughly $14 million worth of properties. If the applicant were to cut back the number of homes and build the larger, more varied homes, the applicant would actually achieve a larger revenue of over $15 million. So as far as an economic argument, I see an economic argument for less but larger homes. And lastly, I just want to point out, just to refresh everybody's memory, this is the home that the applicant is proposing. He's proposing 34 of these with very little variation. A couple of months ago, we approved a development in the North End by EG Homes, and they're proposing to build carriage-style homes, much larger, much more varied, much more expensive. And this backs up my point of building less homes at a higher price. So I believe the applicant, again, I'm not against these type of developments. I'm just against the style and the architecture that the applicant is proposing, and therefore I'm going to vote against the proposal.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kaderis.
I intend to vote in favor of it. That's an aye. I believe the applicant is satisfied. The findings required to be making. I don't believe, as commission, it's our position to get that much into design standards. I think that's up to the free market to decide. If he builds it and they buy it, he will be successful. If they don't, it's as far as what he can do. I have no idea. He has a lot of choices, but that's what he could possibly do is not in front of us. His application is in front of us. I find that he made all the required he made all the requirements from us, and I will be voting in favor of it.
Thank you. Mr. Salmon.
Probably the hardest application I've had to vote on. Actually, without a doubt, probably the hardest. The applicants or the residents made the applicants really challenge them. At the end of the day, they answered every objection. The traffic, the water, the wetlands, everything was, even if they're wrong or off by a certain amount, it's still a positive note. The property values, I think he quoted 450. I think it's actually, he said 460. The property values will go up. The emergency access, when he originally applied, had it going through somebody's property, through somebody's side yard. They corrected that. All in all, I'm voting in favor for it. I think the applicant did a great job explaining everything and accommodating as much as they could.
Thank you. Mr. Tedesco.
I'm going to vote against this. My reasoning basically is that the increase in density is too substantial to leave this really in harmony with the surrounding neighborhood. So I'm going to vote against it primarily for that reason. The comments by the neighbors obviously did have an effect to the extent that they were concerned with preserving their neighborhood. Some of the criticisms and the comments about the applicants made absolutely no difference to me at all. I thought they were inappropriate generally, and they had nothing to do with it. But my general feeling is that there's some, I respect the desire of the neighborhood and the area generally to try to maintain generally the kind of density that's been in there in that area for many years. And this was just too big. I mean, if this was a smaller development, I think I might have felt differently, but it essentially doubles what could otherwise be there. So I'm going to vote no.
Thank you. Mr. Mercado.
Yeah, I feel like Tom, I believe that's going to increase property value in that area. They did meet everything we asked them to do, moving that emergency road, the setbacks, putting up trees. I think if you build bigger homes there, 2-story homes, I know the people of town figured they're going to see all this from their backyard. That's going to be monster homes for them. Even if they cut it down to half, you're still going to have that same type of view in there. They met all the requirements. So I'm going to be voting yes for this application.
Mr. Bowman.
After careful consideration and after going through all the facts, notwithstanding, there were many issues here that people felt with drainage. I think those issues not only were answered, but they were answered not only by the applicant's engineer, but also with a review of someone hired by the town to review the application, because the town doesn't have a staff engineer at this point. Their conclusion was the same as the applicant's engineer. I also took into consideration the wetland situation here, being in 3 different floodplains: Broadbrook, Quinnipiac, and Mill River. It's kind of a unique property. Those questions were answered. Also, the report of the person doing the market analysis showed a need. So I really think that everything was answered here. I don't like to disagree with Mr. Linder, but those are apples and oranges. These are detached condos as opposed to attached condos and duplexes. They are not smaller, or the ones being built on Wallingford Road will be actually larger than the ones proposed up in the north end. And also, being an age-restricted housing, it will have no effect on our schools. Therefore, I will be voting yes on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Natale.
I agree with Mr. Selmont. This has been tough. Listening to everybody from the public, listening to the applicant come in with the experts, with the engineers. I can tell you honestly, I took 13 pages of notes during this whole process because we had so many people speaking both in favor and against this. I looked at the traffic, the children in the schools, as Mr. Bowman pointed out, a public road versus a private road potentially, the wetlands, the drainage, the number of units, the tax revenue for the town. Looked at the regulations when we're talking about harmony and adverse effect. I looked at it personally too, because I do live in very close proximity to Richmond Glen. I was there prior to it. I was there after they built it. I have not seen and did not see what was thought at that time to be a big increase in traffic. I haven't seen an adverse effect. Actually, my property values have gone up. But looking at, I don't want to say sides. I don't like saying one side versus the other, but looking at the whole picture, I think the applicant came in and they bent. They reduced the number of units they were looking for originally. I was concerned about the view from Wallingford Road. I brought up about, building something there, putting up higher trees. We talked about putting the buildings further back to limit that view from Wallingford Road. We talked about the property on Charles Drive where the easement could potentially go through for that emergency access, which is no longer going to happen. And in some of the correspondence between some of the neighbors and the applicant, the applicant did indicate, they have the other option if they if this did not pass or does not pass, to build, I think it was 16 houses, big houses. And they did indicate in that correspondence that they would also, they could go right to the property line, take down the trees. And what I'm looking for, thank you, what I'm looking for, or what I was looking at was the view from Charles, the view from Wallingford Road being less of an impact with this age-restricted community. I do think that there is a need for age-restricted development such as this in Cheshire and other towns. We have an aging population, and for those reasons, I will be supporting the application.
Mr. Dawson.
Well, I personally heard the application. I did a lot of thinking about it. It was where I pretty much brought my family up and spent a lot of years. But applications separate personal feelings. And after weighing it all, I feel that I do my best to follow the regulations, and I'm voting in favor of it.
Thank you. Okay, so I get to end this. I just want to thank the commission members for everybody speaking your opinions, and I respect everyone's opinion, for or against. I respect all of the property owners. Thank you for coming out and telling us what you saw, what you needed, what was going on in your neighborhood. I appreciate that. I want public involvement. That's what a community is about. My job on land use, I can only do land use because I have a business in town, and this is what I could do. And I got involved in land use because I watched that woman right there, that clerk who raised her children in Cheshire 20 years ago, left Spring Street and had to move to Southington. And it really upset me because there was nothing for her to move into. And that really upset me. I'm like, how could this woman that loved Cheshire and that wanted to be in Cheshire had to go to Southington? Because when she sold her house, there was nothing. So at that point in my life, I said, I think that hopefully someday there'll be something that someone like her that sold her house can move into. So I've been for 55 and over from the get-go. I mean, that's kind of something that I always liked because I'm 53. I'm going to be 55 soon. So, I want to retire someday and be in a small house. I think that a lot of people want to downsize. I think a lot of people look to downsize. I think there's not a lot of options in our town. There's a lot of options for big homes. There's not a lot of options for, ranches that if you're disabled, if you have a hard time going upstairs, I mean, those things are not available. I like a small home. I mean, I live in a small home. I feel that was a big plus for me. I didn't like when it came in as 40 units. I didn't like that. I didn't like shared driveways. I was against that. When they changed that, I appreciated that. I do appreciate the whole thing with the water runoff. I think that the biggest thing for me is protecting the landowners around that facility. And to me, if you did 18 or 17 houses individual and there was a problem with water and runoff, you would be dealing with one individual landowner. I felt that if it was a condominium complex with a homeowners association, it would have more bite that you could go after them if you had a water problem. That was one thing that I was thinking. I always think of the worst case scenario. What if something else went in there? What if this? What if that? That's how I always look at stuff. I always try and weigh out the options of if this application wasn't here, what other applications would be coming before us? I think that's the hardest thing about being on zoning is the what if. The what if has to protect us as a community, us as a landowner. The applicant is from out of town. I mean, he's got no ties to Cheshire, and he's coming in. He's brought a lot to the table. Not some of the stuff I didn't agree with, but I really feel that it's a necessity in home ownership to have smaller homes. I think that that's something that, you know, we have 85% of the homes in Cheshire are owned by, or lived in by the owners. And I think that knowing that, I feel that it's some kind of a forward thing versus backward thing. And I'm hoping that the property owners around it would appreciate something different and something better for the community, not just a big bunch of big houses. And I'm voting for it. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to number 2. Okay, so ready? Okay, so I have Linder, no. Yes for Kaderis, yes for Selmont, no for Tedesco, yes for Bricado, yes for Bowman, yes for Natali, yes for Mr. Dawson, yes for me. So it's a 7-2. We good? Okay, moving on, number 2.
Next motion, Mr. Chairman, application for preliminary development plan, APRD, Lovely Development Incorporated for a 34-unit age restricted plan residential development at 648 Wallingford Road and Talmadge Road. The Cheshire Planning and Zoning Commission find that the proposed age-restricted plan residential development is shown on plans entitled Plans Prepared for Whispering Oaks, an age-restricted plan residential development, 43.4, with all revisions agreed to by the applicant through July 26, 2021, satisfies the requirements set forth within section 43.4.8 design standards and section 43.4.4 findings of the Cheshire zoning regulations, and hereby approve this application.
Oops,
I-
that wording.
Second by Mr. Cotto, or Mr. Kaderis. Actually, Kaderis seconded it first. Mr. Dawson. Second by Kaderis. Okay, I'm gonna just read off. Linder, yes or no?
No.
Okay. Kaderis. Yes. Selmont.
Yes.
Tedesco.
No.
Bricado.
Yes.
Bowman.
Yes.
Natali.
Yes.
Mr. Dawson.
Yes.
And me, Strollo, yes. So we have another 7-2.
Next
please.
item, Mr. Chairman, earth removal, filling, or regrading permit, Lovely Development Incorporated, 648 Wallingford Road and Talmadge Road, waiver request per section 25.3.2 subsection 9 under section 25.5 of the Cheshire zoning regulations. The Cheshire Planning and Zoning Commission finds the proposed waiver to permit filling, excavation, grading, removal within 50 feet of any abutting street line or property line as shown on plans entitled Plans Prepared for Whispering Oaks, an age-restricted plan residential development. 43.4 would not involve or create a substantial risk of damage to the abutting property, and hereby approve this request.
Ready? Linder. Oh, yeah, moved by, sorry about that. Mr. Bricado, second by Mr. Kaderis. Mr. Linder.
No.
Okay. Mr. Kaderis. Mr. Selmont.
Yes.
Mr. Tedesco.
I would abstain on this. The other ones I think I have to vote no on because if they approve this application, this is kind of an implementing motion. Given my previous vote no, I think I just should abstain on.
Okay, so you're going to be a 0-1. All right. Mr. Bowman,
Yes.
Mr. Natali,
Yes.
Mr. Dawson,
Yes.
And I'm a yes.
and you're, oh, I'm sorry, for Mr. Bricado, I missed you. Okay, Mr. Bricado, yes. All right. What did Mr. Dawson was yes?
Yes.
Okay. So it's going to be, and myself is yes. So it's going to be 7-1-1. Yes, yes. Okay, the next one.
Special permit application, Lovely Development Incorporated for 34-unit age-restricted plan residential development. The Cheshire Planning and Zoning Commission find that the proposed age-restricted plan residential development as shown on plans entitled Plans Prepared for Whispering Oaks, an age-restricted plan residential development, 43.4, with all revisions agreed to by the applicant through July 26, 2021, satisfies the requirements set forth within section 43.4.8 design standards, section 43.4.4 findings, and section 41 special permits of the Cheshire zoning regulations, and hereby approve this application.
Second by Mr. Kaderis and Mr. Bricado. Have an avocado. Sure. All right. Mr. Linder.
No.
Okay, Mr. Linder, no. Mr. Kaderis. Mr. Selmont.
Yes.
Mr. Tedesco,
No.
Mr. Mercado,
Yes.
Mr. Bowman,
Yes.
Mr. Natale.
Yes.
Mr. Dawson. Mr. Strollo, yes. So that'll be a 8-1-0. Or oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. 7-2-0. Yes. I apologize. I thought Mr. said yes.
Last
Okay.
item, Mr. Chairman, application for final development plan, age-restricted plan residential development, Lovely Development Incorporated, for a 34-unit age-restricted plan residential development at 648 Wallingford Road and Talmadge Road. The Cheshire Planning and Zoning Commission find that the proposed age-restricted plan residential development is shown on plans entitled Plans Prepared for Whispering Oaks and Age-Restricted Plan Residential Development 43.4, with all revisions agreed to by the applicant through July 26, 2021, satisfies the requirements set forth within section 43.4.8 design standards and section 43.4.4 findings of the Cheshire zoning regulations, and hereby approve this application.
Moved by Mr. Kaderis, second by Mr. Bucado. Okay. Huh? Bucado. Okay. Mr. Linder,
No.
Mr. Kaderis, Mr. Selmont. Yes. Mr. Tedesco.
No.
Mr. Bucado,
Yes.
Mr. Bowman,
Yes.
Mr. Natale. Yes. Mr. Dawson,
Yes.
and Mr. Strollo, yes. So we're back to 7-2. Okay. The zone text change application for RW High will be continued.
Everything's continued to the 13th. We have no new applications to set hearings for, Mr. Chairman. Everything
Okay.
else has been received. We'll be busy on the 13th.
Yep. Okay, Mr. Natale.
Bill, is there any update on when the combined meeting of the town council and
Uh,
planning and zoning will be about the cannabis legislation?
No, but I'll ask the town manager tomorrow, and it's, at the town, so it's really his discussions with the chairman of the council to set that meeting, so I'll ask him.